Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, back for our almost every week gathering of our proud, plucky patriots here in the Hopium community who are joining me live. And some of you may be listening as a recording on the Hopium site or on YouTube or as an audio recording podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Welcome to all of you, or however you're diving in here. Tonight is Thursday and it is September 18th. What we try to do every week here is we try to kind of level set where we are, make sense of it all, and then we get into a fun conversation. This is a week, as I wrote today in Hopium, that this is a day, a week, a series of days that, coming out of the tragedy of the killing of Charlie Kirk last week, where the gravity of Trump's descent into authoritarianism has become inescapable. I think that part of what I have been writing and saying over the last few weeks is that I think we've entered in sort of a next phase of this Trump 2.0, that it happened with his dramatic escalation during August. He didn't take vacation up until the very end when he just sort of disappeared for a few days due to potentially a medical condition. But he escalated dramatically during the month of August, and he slapped his tariffs on everybody all over the world and increased them by twofold, threefold, fourfold, and fivefold, if that's a word, right? He fired the BLS director, the DIA head. I won't go through all the things that happened in August, but August was a month of dramatic escalation, and including the sort of the outrageous and traitorous welcoming of a genocidal maniac, Vladimir Putin, to American soil, a war criminal, among the worst war criminals in history, in modern history. It was a bad month if you were concerned about our democracy, and he seemed to be getting increasingly unhinged. His health is clearly in significant decline. Um, and and I think that part of what is driving all of this sort of dramatic escalation, is this sense that his government is failing and that he is in profound physical, cognitive, and political decline, and that he's been unable, and that he's beginning to his powers are beginning to ebb, and that because of that, he is trying to constantly, and we talk about this since his poll numbers began to go down in the beginning of June, when Elon Musk spent 3 days emasculating and attacking him on Twitter, that Trump has been like on this quest to restore his manhood and his strength and his manliness and his power. And he's tried all of these outrageous and spectacular things, right? The bombing of Iran, the invasion of two cities, the firing of high-level government employees, including the games he's playing with the Fed. He's trying to take over the Fed. He's tried all of these things that I think have been designed to help him feel strong again, when the reality is that he's weak, and that his government, and part of my view about what's happened over the last few weeks is that sort of what we got with Trump now, which is this wannabe authoritarian, a failed leader, deeply unpopular, is kind of, people are becoming aware that this is where we are, that sort of this place that sensible people could go where it wasn't going to be this bad, or it couldn't happen here, or that he can't really be that crazy, or there's somehow a secret plan to make the prices go down and the economy surge, or he's really not going to destroy our healthcare system and get rid of vaccines, or whatever those soft comfort that people had, that it wasn't going to be as bad as it looked. I think that place is just not available to anybody anymore, including our political leaders. And I think that there was, for some of our political leaders, I think the process of thinking was, he's screwing up really bad. We'll be able to win it back next year and sort of start to right the ship after the midterms. And as you all know, we have rejected that view here. I mean, I think we are going to do very well in the November elections here. I think we've been doing well in special and local elections all across the country. I think that if we have free and fair elections next year, I think we'll have a very strong midterm performance. But we need to win in this sort of traditional electoral political dimension. But we also have an obligation to mitigate the damage that Trump's doing to the country. And I think that that's been harder for our political leaders to figure out how to do. And so what's happened is that that damage that he's doing to the country, the damage he's doing to the economy, the higher prices, the assault on our healthcare and vaccines, the now this in the last few days, sort of this dramatic escalation of the attack on the First Amendment, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, the sort of the consolidation, the clear effort by the right to consolidate and take away all independent and legacy media in the United States for their own propaganda views, the negotiations with the Chinese to get TikTok and to give it to his right-wing buddies to create yet another kind of propaganda vehicle for them. That all of this, I think we're at a point now, and what I have been arguing in my writing and my commentary is that, there was no way for anyone who was sensible to really any longer live in a place where this wasn't dangerous and that we weren't seeing sort of a dangerous madman continuing to escalate and do, impulsive harm to our interest here, not just in the short term, but also for the long term. And that, we are, and so what we've talked about here is that that Democrats needed, the pro-democracy movement needed to find this higher gear to be more aggressive about mitigating the damage that was being done and confronting his government in a far more aggressive manner, contesting, space against him in the information space every day across multiple fronts. We've advocated for a four-part agenda for us to be approaching the fall budget negotiations, where it was my belief, and we'll see where we end up here, because the negotiation isn't just over the continuing resolution in 12 days, but there's going to have to be a final budget passed for the United States. And what do we want out of those negotiations, or what do we want? What are our values? And I've posited that we have not done an adequate job in explaining to the American people about what our agenda is, that we are operating defensively and tactically and not strategically and on offense. And that what I propose is that we have a four-part agenda, and that agenda starts with rolling back the tariffs that are doing so much damage to America, to American consumers, to our businesses and our farmers, to our standing in the world. That's, to me, still the number one thing that we have to do. It's also the area where Trump is in the worst shape with voters, and it's the number one issue for voters. So it's both the issue with greatest intensity with voters and the place where he's doing the worst. And so that's where we need to be, in my view, sort of centering our engagement with him. The second part of our agenda was to roll back the increases in ICE and to prevent the president from having a private police force, and to restore due process for all people, not just for white people in America, and to prevent the occupation, to sending the military to our cities. Third part of our agenda is to stand up for science and higher ed and public health, and to restore the cuts to Medicaid and the ACA, and potentially, ensure that they don't go after Medicare itself, and to fire Robert Kennedy, who tonight, some of you may have read, they have now dramatically altered the early vaccine regime for children in America. There's no science backing this up. I mean, this is pure medieval, kind of barbaric attempt to undermine the public health of the United States, and in ways that, I'm proud of our community's work to fight this over the last few months. This has been a major priority for us. And then fourth is to stand with Ukraine and with our European allies against Putin, and to prevent Trump from selling out the country to Russia and to China, and to prevent him from trying to relitigate the Cold War, to make sure that they win and that we lose, which it certainly seems to be what he's doing every day. And those are my four the things that I've been arguing, and I've said this is just my four. I mean, whatever your four are, your five, and certainly I think that we've grown to realize in the last few weeks that, and what happened today, I think is very significant. So I think that over the summer, we saw this huge escalation of Democrats, starting with the Texas Democrats and Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker, where we started to see Democrats finding this higher gear and their response to mitigate the damage and to fight Trump in a more aggressive manner, right? I think today we sort of went up another level, and you never know. What we talk about here is you never know when these things are going to happen. You don't know what is going to precipitate, that is going to create a moment where somehow things change. But you saw, I wrote my piece this morning about how, we must demand courage now from our leaders, that it's part of our job here in the Hopium community to be contacting our elected leaders every day, Republican, Democrat, House, Senate, even state and local officials, and demand that they meet the moment and to defend the country. That's their oath that they've taken. And that many of you have been calling offices every day, contacting offices with the goal of helping our electeds come to understand what's expected of them now that things have changed. And I'm just really proud of that. We began that right away in January, and I'm really proud of all of you for taking on this responsibility as big citizens and patriots for helping your electeds understand what's expected of them now, right? And to not be critics, but to encourage, to provide ideas and encouragement for them to find higher gears and to shift into defenders of our Constitution, for proud patriots, to not just be legislators and city councilmen, but people who are communicators, and to grow bigger, right? To get bigger, because that's what the moment requires. We've done a phenomenal job at that, and I'm very proud of you. And I love the self-reports from the calls and the contacts we get every day. And I think that we're going to have to add this other kind of dimension that is not listed in the four agenda points, but it's been core to everything we've been talking about here for weeks, which is that there has to just be sort of a much more direct conversation about his madness, his authoritarian fantasies, his willingness to abandon the global liberal order. I wrote today on Blue Sky, because there's been this talk in our family about soft secession, where states would band together and we would, we saw now just in the last 24 hours, significant progress. We saw Western states band together to offer their own vaccine recommendations, sort of abandoning and just ignoring what was happening to the CDC. We saw New England states band together to do this today as well. These are important sort of evolution, right, and escalation of our sort of dealing with the battle that's in front of us and not the battle that we thought we were going to be fighting, right? This is sort of a growing recognition, as I was saying earlier, both of the failures of his government, but also of the radical nature of what's happening here and the danger that he presents to us. We saw it today with Barack Obama, weighing in very aggressively today on what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. You saw, Leader Jeffries aggressively weighing in here today, about how reminding people in the business community and people in civil society that, we are likely to get the House back next year and we'll have subpoena power, and that, people are going to be held to account for what they've done. I've also called today for Democrats to start doing criminal referrals. This is stuff we were talking about back in February and March, where if we think people have broken laws, if we think that FCC Chair Brendan Carr has broken laws, which it certainly appears that he did in the last few days, then we should file a criminal referral to the Department of Justice to let them know that we believe, the Congress of the United States believes they are breaking laws, and that if they lose power and when they lose power, because Trump will fall at some point, right? The MAGA will fall at some point, that we're going on record asserting that what's happened is lawless and that they're criminal and that they will be held to account, unlike what happened after the last Trump administration. I think obviously we have to take the failure of Merrick Garland, to do the minimum that was required of him as Attorney General. We have to learn from that and to start. And Hakeem, for me, what happened with Leader Jeffries today was significant. This was a, and then we saw Eric Swalwell, wearing a Jimmy Kimmel hat today, in a confrontation in the House, saying, we're going to be in charge here in 13, 14 months, and we're coming after you with subpoenas. Like, all of you better be aware that we're not going to play nice here, and that was great. And then Chris Murphy today led a group of senators to introduce a bill that would put their fascism and their quashing dissent and their violation of the First Amendment, into a very public debate. And Chris Murphy has been great. I mean, he's been up there with Gavin and JB Pritzker and Bernie and AOC and the others that have sort of really tried to be finding a higher gear from the very beginning. And he did something really important today. He called a press conference. He led us. And I think you saw Democrats today, for whatever reason, they got up this morning with Jimmy Kimmel, and there was a dramatic sort of change in the aggressiveness of the language, of the actions, of the, getting real now about what's happening. And it was welcome for all of us. This is stuff that we have been encouraging aggressively. And part of what I was getting at before I went on that little tangent, not a tangent, but that little riff, is that there's been this talk about soft secession where, we would secede as blue states from sort of the federal government. I think that's the wrong way to look at what's happening. I think it's MAGA and Trump that's seceding. They're seceding from, the American-led, they're seceding from the modern world, science and fact. They're seceding from and moving into sort of a 19th century and even earlier kind of medieval, barbaric, sort of Christian white supremacy. They're leaving the global order that America imagined and built after World War II, that we've led for 80 years, that's kept us safe and prosperous for all this time. They're leaving democracy, our democracy, and rule of law, and and um, rule of law and democracy and rule of law. And I'll leave it at that. There was a third in my list. And then they're leaving, and they're seceding from America. We're the ones drawing the line. We're the ones defending America. They're the ones who are betraying it. And I don't think we should put ourselves in a position rhetorically where we are abandoning the American government in America, that there can't be any perception that we have to establish that we're the proud, plucky patriots. We're the ones defending this great country and our democracy, and they're the ones who are betraying it every day. And so I want to have a conversation about secession, but I want to be honest that the people that are seceding from America are not us, it's them. And that we need to hold them to account for this. And I think today we began to see our leaders really grapple with how they're going to talk to the American people about Trump's descent into authoritarianism in ways that I think they've been reticent to do for a variety of reasons. Some of it has been the sort of the tyranny of kitchen table issues where we're only supposed to talk about healthcare and the economy. But you saw kind of Democrats go to a higher gear and develop bigger muscles today. And it was really encouraging to me. And I welcome Barack Obama's involvement and engagement. I think he's been, his voice is welcome here. And it is time now. As I wrote today, we're here now. We're here now. There can't be any mistake about where we are. And that we have to recognize that, like with every authoritarian, is if you don't push back, they take more. And our reticence about attacking him every day and challenging him every day across all fronts and every aspect of his government, from vaccines to the betrayal of the country to Russia to his outrageous tariffs that are doing so much to harm middle class and working people. We need to be in his face every day across all issue fronts. And the House, what I've called for in my writing over the last few weeks is that the House and Senate simply just must organize themselves differently than they're organized in order to be able to do that. He operates 24/7, 365, and so do we. And need to. We need to. We don't now, right? We took August off from public engagement, for example. The good news about all of this if there's any good news in what's happening, is that I think that the American people have come to sort of a majority of the country has come to a rough judgment about this Trump and what he's doing. And they're deeply, deeply unhappy about it. He is not able to get, he is now in the last few weeks been underwater on every major issue in polling, including in some polls, border security and on crime, areas that are supposed to be areas of strength for him. He is, his polling this week after the Charlie Kirk, um, tragedy that took place last week in the Economist YouGov poll that we look at here every week. He dropped 5 points. He went from -13 to -18, the worst poll in that tracking poll that he's had since he came back into office. He's lost 20, 30, 40 points with moderate voters, independent voters, Hispanic voters, young people, people who make less than $50,000 a year. His brand is eroding terribly. He is growing very distant from the American people. The level of intensity of opposition to him is higher than ever at any point in polling history for a president. And now, if the Economist YouGov poll numbers are real and he's seen this decline, he's now even more unpopular than he was in his first term at this point. And let me explain why that matters so much, right? He got 46% of the vote in 2016. He got 50% this time, last time. So it means that he is now low, even though he got a much higher percentage of the vote, he's actually lower in polling than he was at this point in what was a disastrous midterm, and he didn't get reelected in 2020 and they lost the Senate. And so he's now in worse shape in what is arguably the most important weekly tracking poll in politics. And so it's my view that what's happening to him is that somewhere between 52, 53, 54, 55% of the country has basically become unavailable to him. They are not going to buy any of his bullshit. They continually to reject his strongman posturing every time, the media thinks that he bombs Iran or invades a city, that the country's going to rally to him, and they don't, right? They've sort of figured out, the majority of the country has figured out this strongman thing, and what they want is they want a president. They don't want a despot. And so he is continually, every time that he does something that he believes in his diminished madness that he is, that will restore his strength and power and manliness, it actually never works. It hasn't worked since the beginning of June. None of these things that he's done, these spectaculars, have worked. And so here we had another instance last week with Charlie Kirk. This dramatic event happened. And of course, like everything they do, they speak to a very narrow part of the electorate and not to the broad electorate. And their response to what happened with Charlie Kirk was insane and dangerous. Stephen Miller last week declared the Democratic Party a domestic terrorist organization. We are seeing the most inflammatory, unhinged language by government officials, arguably in all of our history right now in the last 10 days. And it is, JD Vance's appearance that, a few days ago was just sort of jaw-dropping in its insanity. And here we are, right? Here we are. And the important thing is that the American people have rejected this politics, this strongman politics. And I just want everyone to imagine if that wasn't the case, if Donald Trump was at 55% approval rating, and that when he did these kind of strongman activities, the country rallied to him, which is what I think they all thought was going to happen in their delusion, their extremism, their craziness, right? And so his decline, which has been profound, the distance that he now has with the American people, his inability to rally the American people around any issue that matters to him, right? This has become a big deal because while it is insufficient to get us to where we need to go in this battle against Trump, it's a necessary condition for us to work for wherever in your mind, however you think we're going to get through to the other side of this. It starts with Trump going into profound political decline. And that's what's happened. And we have to welcome that. It's a hugely important development, necessary but insufficient, but necessary. And so where I sit tonight is, and to sum up, is first of all, I'm incredibly proud of all of you, and I'm proud of the Hopium community. We just go to work every day, right? We know all the shit that's going on. We don't let it get us down. We get knocked down, we get up, we dust ourselves off, we make our calls, write our postcards, we contact our offices, the offices, we go to rallies and protests, we give money to candidates, we volunteer, and we continue to try. And then in my commentary and the people that I've been bringing on, the wonderful people, the guests that we've had, we're also trying to help our leaders find that higher gear and continue to grow into the moment. And we're not doing it through criticism, right? Our job here is to lift people up and not tear them down. I think it's a more effective way to achieve what we need. We could debate that till the end of days, but that's what we're going to do here. We're Hopium Chronicles. We're hope with a plan, right? We do the work we don't just wish tomorrow will be better. We do the work to make it so. And I think that I will tell you, what we've seen in addition to sort of all the obvious things. Look what's happened, right? Chuck's on a major issue that we have been promoting aggressively is that we want Democrats to become more aggressive on the tariffs. Chuck Schumer announced last week that they're going to bring up votes. They're going to force votes to force the Republicans to vote, to either be for the tariffs or against the tariffs. We just saw the Senate, one of the Senate super PACs went up in Alaska today, an expansion state, a place that we've got to put into play with a really hard hitting ad on tariffs, right? We helped do that. That was something through our advocacy, through our analysis, that public and private discussions, we helped create greater understanding in our political strategists and the family that we needed to, not just do healthcare, ACA, Medicaid, got to do that, but we got to do this other stuff too. And what I'm going to continue to push for is this 4-part or even maybe a 5-part agenda, because really I think the most important number one part of the agenda is that people just have to recognize that, as Robert Frost told us, that the best way out is always through. That there just isn't going to be this place where this ever gets easy. That we're going to be in this fight for years and it's going to be really hard. And for people in our politics who I've grown up with and been doing this work with for, decades, this is the hardest thing that any of us are ever going to do, which is to mitigate the damage they're doing and to win back power and to put MAGA into the dustbin of history where it belongs. This is going to take heroic work of millions and millions of people. And what I'm proud of is that, we're leading the way. And I just want you to all know that this new program I announced this week, which is a sign of us trying to find a higher gear and have more ambition, it's a program that's trying to strategically put into play Senate seats that we need to win in red places, red states and red places in 2026, and to also start getting smart and strategic about the electoral college map and how it's changing. And so I'm calling it the Audacious expansion, Hopium's Audacious expansion project. We've raised $15,000 just in the first 2 days of doing this. Thank you, everybody who've been part of that. And that kind of thinking and that kind of ambition, right, is that we're not just going to play it safe by focusing on the House and working to flip the House, that given the way this election is playing out, we have more opportunity, but we only have opportunity if we invest early and create that opportunity and make it possible. We learned that from our own work last cycle, and we're going to do it again this cycle. So take a look at this audacious expansion project. It's focusing on raising money and supporting 5 state parties in Alaska, Iowa, Maine, Texas, and Florida. We have had interviews with 3 of those state party chairs. We're going to have interviews with 2 more in the next few days. So you get to know the state party chairs, get to know the lay of the land. Hopefully at some point, listen, what do I want you to do? What I want you to do now is I want you to focus on helping Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger elected in November by as big a margin as possible. We have early voting starting in person in Virginia tomorrow. We need to make that a big day. If anyone here is from Virginia, please vote tomorrow. Do not wait, or at least vote this weekend, and tell everyone you've ever met that they need to join you in voting early, and have the story as we go into next week, an outrageous, huge turnout in Virginia because people are fighting to come to save their democracy. And we need to win yes on 50. And thanks to all of you who are working on that. But we have these other things we also need to be doing. I mean, the priority is to win the fall, and winning the fall is to get as much of our agenda passed through Congress by the end of the year. It's to win these elections and to win yes on 50. And it's also to prudently be making investments now that early money in these state parties matter so much. We learned that from our discussions with Anderson Clayton and Jane Klebb over and Ruben Gallego, who are people that we invested in early at critical moments. This early money matters much more than money a year from now. And so, please consider making a modest donation to that campaign too. And, continue also to give me advice and counsel how we can make Hopium better and more effective. This is not a shy group, right? We like to have debate and discussion, and I'm grateful for that. And I learned so much from the daily chat every day. And then finally, I want to say that last night I was in Minnesota. I got to meet, not only did we raise money for the Minnesota Democratic Party, I wanted to do it out of solidarity for the tragic loss that they had in June. We did a great event with the state party in St. Paul, but I got to hang out last night with a bunch of Hopium folks, and it was great. And the passion and the intensity, the appreciation of this community, the sensibility of what we do, it was deeply rewarding to me. I obviously work very hard to create this kind of uplifting, can-do kind of spirit at Hopium, where we don't get down, we get up, right, and we fight every day. And I just had a great time last night. And what it reminded me is that I need to go out on the road, probably early next year. I don't know that I can do it before the elections, but we need to be together physically, not just digitally and online. And last night was deeply rewarding for me. And so thank, all the Hopium folks that were there last night. It was really warm and affirming of the importance of this project. And so thank you for really lifting my spirits last night and giving me a little bit of extra fuel to go out and do this work. So let me close with that. Love you guys. Thank you so much for everything we're doing. And let me get to Lincoln's summary of the main questions, some of which may have been covered.